Hello and welcome to another video review. This is F.E.A.R Extraction Point for PC and Xbox 360. This is the first and only expansion pack for F.E.A.R. There's another one called Perseus Mandate, but it's not really an expansion, it's a standalone game. And I believe both of those were included in the Xbox 360 release F.E.A.R Files, and that also includes the original game, by the way. But this game actually requires the original F.E.A.R to run. Perseus Mandate does not. And it was developed by Timegate Studios rather than Monolith, so if you ask Monolith about this, they will say that it's not canon even though it picks up right where F.E.A.R left off. Now the graphics really haven't changed much from F.E.A.R 1, so I don't know why the system requirements are actually higher. It could be that they have more physics processing or something of that nature, but I highly doubt that. Everything looks pretty much the same as it did in F.E.A.R 1, the only difference is it doesn't run as well. And so that's a pretty big problem as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it still does look pretty much the same, but this came out the year after the first game, and the graphics were already kinda dated at the time, so that's a pretty big design flaw right there. Now, on a similar note, the sound design is pretty much the same as well. I mean, it's still got those pretty high-quality sound effects, coupled with some pretty decent, but overall not particularly entertaining voice acting, and even worse is the music, because it's just a rehash of what was in the original game. There's pretty much nothing new there. And so the sound design is pretty much the same as well, and that's not a particularly bad thing, but it's not a particularly great thing either. Now the gameplay and storyline are where they shook things up a slight bit. The main problem is that Monolith has stated officially that Perseus Mandate and Extraction Point are not canon. They do not take place in the official storyline of F.E.A.R. So you can pretty much regard these as fan fictions, and Extraction Point, at least, is pretty much a fan fiction. I mean, the story is a jumbled mess. I mean, it's completely incoherent. Throughout the entire game, you're sitting there wondering what the hell is going on, and even more so than the original. Now, in the original, it was more of a suspense kind of thing. I mean, you could understand what was going on, but you couldn't understand why. In this one, you can't understand what is going on, why it's happening, who's doing what, any of that stuff. It's just a jumbled mess, and the dialogues are not well written anymore, and you're just sitting there scratching your head like, what am I playing here? Now, as for the gameplay itself, it's pretty much the same from F.E.A.R 1 in terms of mechanics. I mean, you still run around doing the kung fu moves, shooting things, hiding behind cover, that sort of thing. They added in some new weapons and new enemies, namely a laser gun and some like ninja kind of characters. They aren't quite ninjas like the original game, but they're more. I guess they're just, you can call them special ops or something like that. But it adds in some more supernatural stuff. But that's where it really changed the gameplay. It focuses much more on the horror aspect of the game, and unfortunately for it, that doesn't work very well. Now, in the original game, it didn't work particularly well either, but in this one, it has these really awkward transitions from intense shooter combat to instantly very long horror sequence. The dream sequences from the original game are back, and there are much more of them, and they are much more vivid and much more ridiculous. And you're left scratching your head wondering what in the hell are you seeing? I mean, it's like taking a step into an acid trip or something. I mean, it just looks like that. You're sitting there wondering why the walls are disappearing and why you're walking on, like, blood trails, stuff like that. I mean, the same sort of thing with like Max Payne's dream sequences, but those actually made sense in the context of the game. But the main problem is just that the game is not fun. The level design is horrendous. Now, it was pretty linear and cramped in the original game, but it's even more so now, and you're sitting there in these really tight corridors trying to get around like basically mechs, and it's just awful. The horror aspects are definitely unwanted in this particular expansion pack, because when you focus more on the horror aspect than the gameplay aspect, the shooter mechanic, which it's really known for, you lose really what made F.E.A.R unique, and that was the gameplay itself. It really played very nicely. And Extraction Point doesn't really feel like a game, to be honest with you. It feels more like just this very tedious rail shooter, and that's pretty much what it is. I mean, yes, the new laser gun is kind of cool, but other than that, the level design is so horrendous. You'll be constantly wondering where you're supposed to go, why you can't progress any further. There's a lot of bugs, and it's just an overall very confusing, very muddled shooter, and it's just not welcome in the F.E.A.R universe. I mean, I have not played Perseus Mandate yet, but I'd assume it's pretty similar to that, and I will review it eventually, but still, Extraction Point is a horrible, horrible expansion pack, and they really shouldn't have made it. I mean, yes, it continues where F.E.A.R Left off, but once you finish it, you're sitting there watching the credits sequence, and you're just wondering why. Why did I play this? Because that's just how bad it is. It's only single player. It's not multiplayer at all, so you don't have that aspect to play with. But if you have F.E.A.R, don't bother getting this, because you'll just get intensely frustrated by it, or you'll find that the horror aspect is kind of annoying, or all sorts of different things, and you'll just not be able to have fun with it. So overall, I really can't recommend it at all. It's a pretty terrible expansion pack, and I give it a 1.5 out of 5, and thanks for watching.